Hello and welcome to AMSA's online event, Returning the Youth Back to Canada's Future, a webinar on employment barriers for youth and how to tackle them. My name is Sabrina Dimitra. I'm AMSA's Settlement and Integration Program Manager, and I will be facilitating today's event. Before we get started, I would like to thank Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada for funding today's event. I'd like to now introduce our speakers for today and hand it over to their content expertise. So our first speaker, and they're going to be co-presenting together, so I'll be introducing both of them. Kemal Sen is a second-year UBC commerce student, currently working on a nationwide project in which he tries to tackle the issues youth are facing en route to employment. He also works part-time as a business development associate in a fintech company. Coming from Turkey, he is a passionate kickboxer. He loves programming artificial intelligence and using computer-aided design tools and 3D printers for his projects. He can speak English and Turkish fluently and has conversational Russian and knows basic Mandarin. Every day, he is getting closer to his dream of opening a business where he can be a place of hope for the most. So welcome and thank you so much for joining and for sharing. Our next speaker is Musko Wakil. Musko has graduated from the Kyrgyz State Academy of Law with honors while she was an Afghan refugee in the Kyrgyz Republic. Working as a youth outreach case manager with Mosaic, Musko actively engages in youth empowerment and leadership. She helps refugee youth in their settlement and integration, not only through her employment with Mosaic, but also on a volunteering basis. Musko conducted computer classes for youth who had low computer literacy through conducting English conversation circles. She helped seniors with multiple barriers learn how to communicate with medical providers. As well, Musko participates in local youth consultations and spoke about the needs and issues refugee youth face after their arrival in Canada. If that's not enough, Musko also leads the Canadian Council for Refugees Youth Branch in BC and helping refugee youth get engaged. The local branch and youth consultations inspire Musko to actively participate in the community and help other youth become leaders in their communities. And Musko speaks 7 languages and is planning on learning French. So welcome, and wow, you both have very impressive resumes. I'm glad you're here to share, and we're looking forward to learning from both of you.
Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you for having us. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. So my name is Musko Wakil, and I'm Youth Outreach Case Manager in Mosaic, BC.
And hi, everyone. This is Kemal. I would like to firstly thank Sabrina for introducing us and organizing this event. Also, I'd like to thank each and every one of you specifically, because it just shows that you are as enthusiastic as we are on tackling this global issue of youth unemployment. We would like to begin by acknowledging that we are fortunate to be able to gather on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish people. Having said that, young people today struggle in the labor market in spite of being the most highly educated generation in history. Unemployment is generally higher among young people than prime-age adults, and those who do work tend to have poorer quality jobs and are much more likely to be on temporary contracts or earn low wages than old workers. The Great Recession hit young people particularly hard, and as recovery has been jobless in many countries, many young people have not seen their situation improve ever since. The situation has significant social, political, and economic consequences. In the absence of adequate public support, declining household incomes increase the risk of poverty. They may force young people and their families to cut down on essential expenditure on food, housing, and health care, so damaging their well-being and health. Periods of inactivity and unemployment in early adulthood have also been shown to have lasting negative effects on future employment prospects and earnings too, according to the research made by OECD in 2015. The growing uncertainty with which young people grapple at the outset of their careers can also keep them from reaching traditional markers of adulthood. As you may know, securing a steady job is often associated with the decision to leave the parental home and is typically a prerequisite for starting a family. In the long term, inactivity and unemployment can generate isolation and disengagement from society, with adverse consequences for social outcomes such as health, fertility, and trust, and can eventually lead to crime, according to Corsilli and colleagues' research in 2015, which are only some of the associated costs of youth unemployment. The terminology describing youth need, referring to not in education, employment, or training, first appeared in the late 1990s UK government report to describe youth who were having trouble securing employment or making a successful transition into higher education. Since then, need has become a regularly reported indicator for youth by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD. Today, the number of youth need is a global issue, and youth need are considered to be at risk for long-term economic and social difficulties. Even the United Nations included a substantial reduction of youth need rates as one of its 2030 Sustainable Development Goals as part of its 8th goal, SDG 8, a sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. Youth employment is an important factor for social cohesion. From a macroeconomic perspective, persistently high rates of unemployment or inactivity are a substantial loss of economic opportunity and income. They undermine trust in political institutions and policies, while from an individual viewpoint, underemployment can inflict scars on youth that last for many years. Indeed, there is an ample evidence that even short spells of inactivity and unemployment at the outset of a career can have lasting effects. Young people who experience a period of early unemployment are most prone to unemployment later in careers too, and have been shown to earn less. The sweeping job losses in the wake of the 2007 and 2008 financial crisis hit young people disproportionately hard. They are more likely to work in temporary and atypical contracts that are easier to terminate. In other words, they are what the concept of labor market duality describes as outsiders. Moreover, in times of weak labor demand, young people with little or no work experience struggle to find a job. The slow recovery in many countries since the crisis has failed to reverse trends in youth employment and restore it to pre-crisis level, even OECD-wide. The number of employed young people aged 15 to 29 years fell by 8% between 2007 and 2015, while overall employment increased slightly. While many countries have experienced bouts of recovery, they have generally been too weak to drive up youth employment rates significantly. Young people with low levels of education attainment, what I mean by that is below upper secondary, were most vulnerable during the economic crisis and have continued to be during this slow recovery. They are also at the highest risk of long-term scarring effects. The number of needs rose in most OECD countries as a result of sweeping job losses in the wake of economic crisis. A breakdown of needs into those actively seeking a job, the unemployed needs, and those who are not, the inactive needs, shows that in most countries, the majority of needs are not even looking for work. I will be talking about the variety of reasons inactive needs are not actively seeking for work, such as care obligations, health problems, substance abuse problems, as well as the belief that any job search would be unsuccessful. And in some countries, low female participation in the labor market leads to high inactive need rates among young people too. However, it is useful to mention that since inactive needs are not necessarily registered with the public employment or welfare services, they can be particularly hard to reach. Well, here some questions come to mind. How much of the need problem is directly caused by the fall in labor demand during and after the Great Recession? And how much is structural? What I mean by that is, are need rates expected to fall as labor demand picks up again? Or are there obstacles to the employment of needs that go beyond business cycles? For example, a mismatch between the skills of young people and the requirements of employers. The figure shows that the inactive and unemployed need rates are as shown in the figure since late 1990s. And the rate of inactive youth who are not in employment shows a slight but steady downward trend that continued throughout the crisis years. Over the last 17 years, it fell by 2 percentage points. The unemployed need rate, however, clearly fluctuates with the business cycle. During the Great Recession, it increased significantly more than during previous downturns, reaching a maximum of 7.5% in 2013, which is significantly higher than any value observed during this time period. This suggests that while young people suffered severe job losses during the crisis, the average need rate across the OECD is not likely to fall more than 2 or 3 percentage points as the economy recovers. What does it mean? The structural component of the need problem therefore requires targeted policies that help young people overcome the barriers to employment they face. Well, who are the needs? Let's draw a profile of jobless youth. Policies to prevent and curb youth unemployment and inactivity require an understanding of the obstacles that keep needs out of employment or education. Only then can they be effectively designed and tailored to needs. Needs are a diverse group, as are the challenges they face within and between countries. Some young people struggle to secure employment because they left school early, while others, particularly women, have caring obligations. Those affected by illness or disability may face practical difficulties in engaging in education or employment, while migrants may face language barriers. The need rate among Canadian youth has remained relatively stable at around 13% for the past 2 decades, and youth needs are considered to be at risk for a multitude of long-term economic and social difficulties. And by some measures, the number of young Canadians defined as need has been estimated at close to 1 million. Low levels of education and skills heighten the risk of becoming need. As the labor market demands ever higher levels of educational attainment and skills, low education levels are decisive factors in becoming need. On average, need rates in the OECD are 3 times higher among young people educated to lower secondary level, and it is 1.5 times greater at medium level with upper secondary level than among their highly educated peers with university level or tertiary degrees. Because too many young people fail to complete upper secondary school, 17% of young adults had a maximum of lower secondary education in 2014. This means that a large share of needs is not fully educated. Actually, just under 1/3 of all needs have only reached lower secondary school, while 43% have gone no further than upper secondary school, and only 1/4 of needs have higher education qualifications. While the lack of education is the foremost factor leading to non-employment among young people, being a woman worsens the risks. Women are indeed more likely to become need than men, OECD-wide 1.4 times more. Behind that average figure, there are variations from country to country. One reason may be the traditional gender-related assignment of roles, with women doing the most of the unpaid domestic work and caring for children. Or cultural differences aside, the main reasons for inactivity among young women most often relates to childcare responsibilities, while poor health is the single most widespread cause among males. More than half of women ascribe their inactivity to caregiving and family responsibilities, which probably means looking after small children, as employment rates are generally low among mothers of very young children. Also, child care costs are a thing between them too, as another reason, another research made by OECD shows the costs as the 15% of their income. A relatively small proportion of needs, 7% on average across the OECD, report being in poor health, while a larger proportion, just over 1/5, report limitations in their daily activity due to the health. But even if a minority of needs report poor health, at the individual level, illness or disability is strong predictor of the need status, especially among males. Physical or psychological problems often represent serious obstacles to finding employment and acquiring work experience. Similarly, a relatively small proportion of needs, 13% on average across the OECD, are foreign-born youth. Nevertheless, individually foreign-born young people are significantly more exposed to the risk of being needs than the native-born. In the most OECD countries, youth born outside their country of residence are 1.5 times more likely to be need than native youth. Foreign-born young people are more at risk of becoming needs because they might not be sufficiently proficient in the host country's language, have lower levels of educational attainment, or suffer from discrimination. Indeed, a poor command of language can lead to low educational attainment and thus feed a vicious circle of disadvantage. Many of the disadvantages leading to unemployment or inactivity we reviewed so far, like low education, poor skills, health problems, such as mental disorders or early pregnancy, are often transferred from parents to children. Parents' socioeconomic status is thus a strong predictor of their children's, according to Clark's research in 2014. Needs are 80% more likely than other young people to have parents with no upper secondary schooling and twice as likely to have parents who do not work. For this reason, at the aggregate level, a significant share of unemployed or inactive youth have a disadvantaged background. About a third of needs have parents with at most lower secondary education, or jobless parents, which is twice the rate of non-need youth. As an experienced social worker who have worked with many immigrants, seen the challenges they face, and always try to come up with solutions, even if it means sacrificing a lot, I believe Muscat will be able to talk better on the topic in newcomers' perspective and discuss some policies that can be made with the aim of to decrease the need rate.
Thank you, Kemal. Our program is more focused on settlement and integration needs and giving a safe space for youth age 16 to 28 years old to express their concern, build confidence, to make friends with others, and plan for the future career. So when we meet the client who is in the stage of settlement and integration continuum, first we do is the needs assessment. So providing information and orientation regarding the Canadian system, education, employment. Providing information regarding employment programs within Mosaic and referring clients to other stakeholders. But before referring the clients to those programs, first we give information about how to look for a job, interview skills. For example, explaining the Canadian workplace culture and the culture differences, providing information regarding resume creation, which includes the information about differences in the system. For example, in many countries, people who seek jobs should attach their photo in their resume. However, in Canada, it's not like that. Newcomer youth has numerous challenges to overcome, and first, which is employment. Most of the youth have the challenge of finding employment in a short time after arrival in Canada. So as an example, I want to say that both of us, Kemal and I, were newcomers and clients of Mosaic, and we were trained as youth leaders. I'm an employee of Mosaic now, and Kemal is a youth leader of Mosaic, the Canadian Council for Refugees branch in BC, and the youth leader in his community. So I'm sharing our experiences because we all, or both of us, went through this stage of settlement. So I joined the Mosaic Youth groups when I did not speak English and was a newcomer, so 5 years ago. That said, just a little support can bring a huge change to youth's life. Now, when we are inspired, we want to help other youth through different opportunities that are available in the community. So young people today struggle in the labor market in spite of being highly educated. Unemployment is generally higher among young people than prime age adults, and those who do work tend to have poorer quality jobs and are much more likely to be on temporary contracts or to earn low wage than older workers. Many youth are not attending school and adult learning centers or link programs. According to youth, it because they have to work, pay bills, and support their families that are still staying in the home country or being a refugee in other countries. Nowadays, youth are exposed to drugs, and the access to drugs are easier compared to the countries where the youth are coming from. So that's it. According to youth, when they face employment challenges, they seek relief through drugs, which unfortunately affects their overall life as well as their mental health stability. Most of the youth are asking for emotional support and counseling services. We refer our clients to medical clinics and clinical counseling, and mostly we pay attention on cross-cultural support, or for example, referring clients to Umbrella Multicultural Health Co-op, where they um, helping the clients with interpretation and understanding both like cultures, the Canadian and being the bridge between patient and the doctors. Uh, so I want to talk about the strategies and policies to promote self-sufficiency among young people, or once we have these issues, how to tackle these barriers. First, I would say support, which is the main key solution. For example, many of you, they are dropping out of school um, to find employment and to find a full-time job. So it's generally not a sudden, unexpected event, but rather the consequences of a long process of gradual disengagement. It can be driven by a range of different factors. For example, learning difficulties, mental health issues, problem in the family, parents' attitudes towards education or the school experience, which tend to interact and build up over time. To prevent a young person from dropping out of school because of the pressure of finding a job, these challenges need to be addressed as soon as they arise. Schools should systematically monitor student attendance and keep key stakeholders, especially parents and social services, like inform them and to ensure them that students are detected and receive the attention they need. If poor school performance and absence are caused by non-educational factors, such as problems in the family, health concern, or substance abuse, they need to be addressed if there is to be a sustainable improvement in educational outcomes. And specialized support staff, for example, in schools, is key to quickly identifying and addressing the challenges that a troubled young person may face. Trained psychologists or social workers can be an important first point of contact for students, parents, and teachers when problems arise. Where schools lack the resources for such specialized staff, or staff have received the appropriate training, can provide important support. So a second strategy would be support networks outside of school. For example, social and health services, public employment service, and possibly NGOs, for example, playing an important role in addressing more severe or long-lasting problems that schools are incapable of dealing with on their own. Depending on young person's needs, social workers or other support staff might help address family problems, resolve a difficult housing situation, put a young person in touch with health services, or act as a mediator between the young person and the police or courts. In my opinion, we need to develop platforms for youth to provide information and orientation regarding employment. For example, numerous workshops where the youth community will be able to learn about the rights and responsibilities of the employee, workplace safety under the Employment Standard Acts, human resources in the workplace. To provide the youth with tools and resources, such as increasing the company training days. That said, if newcomer youth have a language barrier, they need additional support. Many of newcomer youth are not confident speaking to employers about their challenges as they are afraid to lose their job or even to get it in the first place. So we refer clients to Mosaic existing programs such as Career Path for Skilled Immigrants, Job Readiness, Fast Track to Manufacturing program where the youth get the training and other employment programs and referring the youth to other stakeholders. Many of youth can speak the advanced English language. However, they may not know the social norms, the system, and communication skills. And there's a gap. And to fill that gap, in my opinion, we need to create a youth-specific mentorship service to enter the Canadian job market and educational institutions. I want to say that many organizations may have a mentorship program, including Mosaic. However, the mentorship program needs to have a cross-cultural service, which makes the youth feel comfortable sharing his or her skills and to better understand the Canadian culture compared to their own culture. So the next strategy, I would say after school programs are particularly valuable for this disadvantaged young people. Well-designed after-school programs can make considerable contribution to the educational and social development of young people. Attractive opportunities for young people to engage in sports, learn a musical instrument, or get involved in handcrafts and other practical activities can help build the social and professional skills while countering the risk of isolation. The next strategy will be internships that gives students early insights into the labor market. So summer internship programs can be opportunities for young people to try out trades in which they are interested, to get first work experience and build links with local employers. They can be of particular benefits to disadvantaged young people who are more likely than their well-off peers to spend their summer holidays. By involving young people in meaningful work experience, internship can help to offset the knowledge lost during school holidays and prevent young people from engaging in illicit activities. So finding a quality internship is not easy. However, especially for young people whose parents lack connections. Available internship may not have a strong enough training component to be valuable, or they are unpaid and hence difficult to afford for low income youth. So the next strategy would be career guidance. which helps ensure that students make their right choices. Quality career guidance can boost education and training competition rates by improving the match between young people and their chosen path. It can strengthen social mobility by informing young people of career paths that their family and social networks may not suggest, and encouraging them to choose paths more likely to lead to stable employment. Young people's participation in career guidance is easiest to ensure in case of school-based career counseling. And the last strategy, a low cost. For example, low intensity interventions like job research assistance, counseling, and short training courses in CVs or resume writing and interview techniques can be sufficient for clients with low barriers to labor market entry. They may also be useful for testing a young person's readiness for participation in more intensive activities.
All right. Thanks so much, Oscar. So in this part of the webinar, I will be referring to a study to give some insights on the cost of the need. It is the study of Statistics Canada, which was published very recently, actually. It's the last November. And the results are based on surveys of 13,270 participants that were surveyed between 2015 and 2017. They also use the data on the Canadian Community Health Survey. There is also a little bit information I think will be useful to share before we go ahead. In the study sample of all youth need in Canada, 38% is looking for paid work, while 27.5% were caring for children, and 34.5%, as you see, were classified as other. Well, in this study, youth need reported poor general physical health than youth non-need. Youth needs were less likely to report very good or excellent general health compared with youth non-need, which is 55.9% versus 72%. A similar pattern was observed among all youth needs subgroups. Among youth needs, 62.9% of those who were caring for children reported very good or excellent health, while the figure was 58.8% for those who were looking for paid work and 46.3% for those in the other subgroup. Mental health among youth need has been a major concern. Overall, youth need reported poorer mental health than youth non-need, with 13.8% of youth need reporting poor or fair mental health compared with 7.8% of youth non-need. Additionally, 61.4% of youth need reported very good or excellent mental health compared with 69.6% of youth non-need. Among youth needs, while those who are caring for children were in general similar to youth non-need, those looking for paid work and in the other subgroup were more likely to report poor or fair mental health, 13 and 19.3% respectively, and they were less likely to report very good or excellent mental health too, which is 58.7% and 55.6% respectively. Youth need were also more likely to report mood and anxiety disorders compared with youth non-need, 16.8 versus 7.5% for mood disorders and 20% versus 10.5% for anxiety disorders, which, as you see, is twice the size. A similar pattern of differences was observed among all youth need too. All three subgroups were more likely to report mood and anxiety disorders. Yet, the percentages for mood and anxiety disorders were lowest for those caring for children and highest for those in the other subgroup, and followed by those looking for paid work. And unfortunate as it is, just under 1/4 of youth need, 23.7%, reported seriously contemplating suicide in just the past year, compared with 14.9% of youth non-NEET. A comparable percentage of youth NEET who were caring for children reported considering suicide in the past year as 20.4%. And the figure was higher at 24.1% among those who are looking for paid work, and it was 26.5% among those in the other subgroup. Illicit drug use was similar between youth NEET overall and youth non-NEET, which is 22.3% versus 22.4%. However, differences emerged once again among subcategories of youth NEET. For illicit drug use, while the rate for those in the other subgroup, 25.7%, was comparable with the rate for youth non-NEET, youth NEET who were caring for children were less likely, which is 8.3%, and those who were looking for paid work were more likely, which is at 29.6%, to report using illicit drugs in the past year compared with the youth non-NEET. Overall, youth NEET were less satisfied with their lives than youth non-NEET too. This was evident when considering the highest levels of life satisfaction, a score of 9 or 10 out of 10. 33.2% of youth NEET were very satisfied compared with 39.7% of youth non-NEET. While youth NEET who were caring for children and those in the other subgroup were as likely to be very satisfied with their lives as youth non-NEET, those who were looking for paid work, again, were less likely to be very satisfied with their lives, which I believe is easy to understand from the last 3 points, that being unemployed and trying to look for work can be very stressful. In addition, there is a recognized societal impact too, including increased economic cost to social safety net, economic cost of lost productivity resulting from lower output and loss of tax revenues, and increase in crime rates and related costs. The longer people are out of work when young, the more severe the effects can be. The long-term adverse effects of unemployment are felt more acutely by lower skilled workers than those with medium to high skill levels. The 2010 study, Prince's Trust, The Cost of Exclusion, cites evidence of long-term rates and employment impacts of youth unemployment. And they say every 3 months of unemployment at age 22 is associated with additional 1.3 months of unemployment between age 28 and 33. Also, long-term youth unemployment creates a wage gap of 12 to 15% by the age of 42 when compared against peers. Another study on the long-term effects of youth unemployment cites evidence from the United States that persons who experience 26 months of unemployment before age 22 typically earn $1,400 to $1,650 less per year than their peers at age 26. And similarly, $1,050 to $1,150 less per year at the age of 30. A study just recently, a similar study that has just recently cited in The Economist, suggests that men who experience a year of unemployment before age 23 will earn 23% less than their peers 10 years later, and 16% less 20 years later. Bell and Blanchflower, in their research in 2019 and 2013, estimate that a 6-month spell of unemployment at the age of 22 would result in an 8% lower wage at 23, and just 1 year later, and even at age 30 and 31, wages should be 23% lower than they would have been otherwise. Well, in recent years, attention on youth not in employment, education, or training has increased. This topic is currently a priority for international organizations, as evidenced by the United Nations, including the NEED indicator in its 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, and by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, monitoring youth need over time for international comparisons. This topic is also relevant in Canadian context because the need rate among Canadian youth has remained relatively stable at around 13% for the past 2 decades, and youth need are considered to be at risk for a multitude of long-term economic and social difficulties, according to the several researches referred to in this presentation so far, mainly made by Burnett, Henderson, Marshall, Statistics Canada, and Council of Ministers of Education Canada. That's why we want to take action by targeting these emerging world problems. As discussed by Muska a little bit while ago, we talk about some policies that can be made to tackle the problem in the possibly long term. And we, as Anatolian Cultural Center, started a project that targets needs in Canada, the challenges they face, and the policies we can make to tackle their issues. We have evidence that the major 4 problems leading to unemployment include education gap, criminal police record, substance use, and language barrier. According to the expert panel on youth employment gathered by the Government of Canada just recently, and several additional research made by Statistics Canada, and reports made by the Poverty Roundtable HP, John Howard Society, and McCreary Center Society, we believe that focusing on these 4 issues can have significant positive change in relatively short terms. But without boring you by delving into too much detail, our project consists of 2 parts, raising awareness and expanding network. With weekly activities with our partner organizations, we plan to organize informative events such as this webinar or seminars and consultations targeting the audience of the needs and their families. The experts will talk about several topics such as the short and long-term adverse effects of substance use and criminal records, how it will end their career dreams, and its societal impact. For the education gap and language barrier problems, assistive education will be provided in needed areas since, as you may know, even because of language deficiency alone, it is an unfortunate fact that many students, regardless of their other qualifications and knowledge, just cannot be admitted to their desired programs or schools, while some, even though they were admitted, they need to drop out solely because of this barrier. Also, the reason we're involving the family in the events is to include them as a part of the solution process, to make them aware that it is not only the government's problem and responsibility to remove the barriers to youth employment and encourage them to be a part of the help. We also aim to improve the quality and quantity of the network of our youth. We often think that self-control comes from within, yet many of our actions depend just as much on our friends and families as ourselves. Those we surround ourselves with have the power to make us fatter, drink more alcohol, care less about the environment, and be more risky with some protection, or make us a part of this enormous need group. This is not simply peer pressure in which you deliberately act in a certain way to fit in with the group. Instead, it is largely unconscious. Beneath your awareness, your brain is constantly picking up on cues from the people around you to inform your behavior, and the consequences can be serious. That's why with our weekly, monthly, and even yearly activities, we also want to act as a bridge between people with different backgrounds. We aim to have them gain new perspectives and insights with the new people they meet, and hopefully establish everlasting friendships that create a positive impact. However, I would like to remind you that there are close to 1 million youth in our country who are in need of employment, not only for the betterment of individuals, but the whole society. And since especially inactive needs are not necessarily registered with the public employment or even welfare services, they can be particularly hard to reach. by the way, 1/3 of NEETs in Canada are inactive NEETs. That's why please note our contact information, as we are open to any kind of partnerships, feedbacks, or even just a chat about how we can return these precious assets back to our country's future. Thank you very much for listening. Now, if you have any feedbacks, comments, or questions of any sort, we would love to hear them.
Thank you so much, Kamal. Thank you, Muska,
Thank you.
for presenting and for sharing.
Sure.
And so, just as I mentioned earlier at the start, there are 3 different ways how you can submit your questions for today's event. So you can type your questions in the question box. You can tweet using the hashtag AMSA events, or you can email your questions to jship@amsa.org. And I just wanted to note, because we have received this question a few times, yes, we will be sending and sharing the PowerPoint presentations following the webinar, so you will have the contact information for our speakers there as well. And so, as I mentioned in the start, we just wanted to provide a shout out to some of the organizations that do provide a youth-specific, newcomer youth-specific employment programming. And so I'd just like to mention Diversity Research Society in Surrey has 3 programs for newcomer youth as well. Works in Victoria also has an employment program specifically for newcomer youth. And so one of the questions that came up was, and I'll direct it at both of you, and then see who would like to take on this question. If you could clarify around NEET, so not in employment, education, or training. So how do you end up becoming NEET? What is the kind of the pathway? I know that you talked about, health being a factor, or being a caregiver, but the question came from people who are trying to understand this concept of NEET. What is a pathway, or how do youth become part of being NEET?
Well, I can answer this question.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So first of all, according to what it has been first addressed as NEET in 1990s by the United Kingdom government, if you are in between the age of 15 and 29, and if you're not working or if you're not pursuing an education or any kind of training, it makes you be a part of the NEET group. So you're a NEET. And there are a lot of ways actually that you can be involved with this group, as we talk about. One, the biggest subgroup was the people who have caring responsibilities, just because they have to take care of their children, and also because the child care costs is very expensive in a lot of countries. They just choose to stay at home instead of pursuing an education or any kind of employment, and they want to spend more time with their kids, which consists of, in Canada, around 1/3 of the NEET population. And in Canada, again, I think it's a very interesting number that nearly 1 million people, according to the recent study by the Statistics Canada, nearly 1 million people is in this category. They're not educated or following an education. They are not in any kind of employment or training. And 1/3 of this means nearly 380,000 people who are just NEET just because of their caring responsibilities. But there are other reasons too. For example, their parents, 80% of the behaviors you perform comes from your parents. And if your parents were a NEET beforehand, or if they're not higher educated, or if they're not in employment, it will affect you too, and you will most likely, according to the study, 80% there's 80% chance that you'll end up being a NEET too. Also, migrant youth is very well affected, as because of the 2 major problems, one of which is education gap, and the other one is language barrier. So even if, yeah,
Yeah,
It-
I also want to add, Kemal, that even if your English is advanced and you can speak English, but there's again a gap of not knowing the system, or you're not confident enough to stand for your rights, or in workplace, for example, as I mentioned, talking to employers, or for example, if you didn't understand something, um, just because you're not confident, you cannot express your thoughts because you're scared. And again, it all are coming with the culture. People are coming from their own country, and then in Canada, they don't know the system, they don't know the social expectation and
Exactly.
norms. Yeah, so all these are gaps and can be included to needs categories.
So what is one way how, settlement organizations that are looking to put on programming for newcomer youth in regards to employment, how can they look to try and connect or find individuals who are part of the NEET category?
Well, for example, nowadays that we are working with youth and mostly with refugees, uh, when we are talking to them regarding employment and the barriers that they have, then we understand that, for example, this youth are having this barrier, and a settlement organization is trying to um, create, for example, a safe space for them to come and to share their experience, while the service providers are preparing the workshops to provide the information for them, or to connect them to the employment or career advisors, or for example, connect them to the youth specific employment programs. So yeah, that's why we are saying that the issue is big, and that's why we want to bring um, service providers attention into this.
yeah, just to add on that briefly, well, most of the settlement organizations, they have youth programs already, and just even searching among their own clients who they think in need, or who they believe in the process of being in need, they can just require a, sorry, like question about other people that they know, because most of the need, I didn't mention that, but in the study again, most of the need are actually know each other, and most of the need, one of the biggest reasons of need is their network, because the people in their environment are not people who are in education, or who are, I don't know, prefer to spend their time in employment or related activities. They ended up being need, which at the end affects their environment too, which what I meant by like having a like more quality network. So that's why if they just simply, try to contact with their clients, ask them about if there are any other people, I'm pretty sure they'll be able to
So
show
yeah,
confidence.
that's right. Yeah. So that's why I'm saying that we're creating, for example, or running workshops, or even bringing the issue to national level. For example, we are having the Canadian Council for Refugees local consultation, where we invite all the youth from different communities and different organizations, just to bring them together and speak about this issue. And from the reports that we will have on the consultation or meetings, we will be able to understand how many people are under the need category, and how we can help.
Also, since it's an emerging topic, especially after it was mentioned as one of the 17 goals of the United Nations, and after all the reports that made by the OECD, a lot of organizations worldwide are trying to tackle this specific issue. There are even many, only in Canada too, they're trying to find and help people like youth need specifically. one of which is like us. Even if they can simply contact with us, we would love to guide them in this process too.
Okay, thank you. And then, so how long does a youth on average stay in NEET? Like how, because you mentioned that, economically they're going to be impacted even years later. Is there an average length of time that a youth remains in NEET, or is it something that is a longer period of time, that the longer it will impact them more, versus the shorter period of time?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just in front of my research by the OECD. Like in OECD wide, I cannot talk about the Canada wise at the moment as I don't have it near me. But in OECD wise, among 2/3 of youth are not even looking for work, which is 28 million people. Also, according to them, 61.4 of the youth need stay as need for the next 10 years of their lives, and 13.8 of them stays as a need for the next of their 20 years. So these numbers are very big.
That's right. So from my experience, that when I'm meeting a newcomer youth, so the short term can be 6 to 9 months. I'm talking about the youth that are still active, but having some barrier, which is it can be health or it can be language barrier, but yeah, it can be, they can stay in the category of need more than 1 year, 2 years. Yeah, so, but we are trying to empower them
Exactly,
through the
exactly.
opportunities that are available in the community, or we're providing to them. Yes, so we know that the main issue is the competency and when, for example, they're coming to a new country, they don't have any hope, for example, to get a better job or be successful person in Canada. But through empowerment and supporting the youth and giving them opportunities, even volunteering for opportunities, it can really have a good impact on them and help them.
Exactly. That's why, briefly, I can say it's very important for them to reach out, because as we mentioned, like 2/3 of them do not want to even pursue it, or do not even try to or find a job. And
Yeah,
they stay
yeah.
like that. And again, numbers like 60%, they just stay like that. And we believe that the biggest reason that it has become a very big reason worldwide is that first, they're not easy to find, of course, but the reason is that they're not being reached out to.
Okay, thank you. Another question that came up is in regards to employment services for newcomers. And so we're also talking about specifically employment services for newcomer youth. How do they differ? Like, what are the differences between employment services for newcomers, and what is the specific in terms of that employment services for newcomer youth? And you also mentioned youth, I believe we were the ages for employment services was 18 to 28.
In our organization, it's 16. So we have different programs, but the job readiness, for example, is 16 to 28. So this program is helping to look for work and with resume creation and accompany a client to the job fair, or to, for example, if the client has job interviews, so the job readiness facilitator can accompany. Also, we have manufacturing trainings, but the age is between, believe, 18 to 24. Yeah,
Okay.
so they are different trainings and different programs. But specific, so yeah, for newcomer youth, they specifically providing training or first aid, for example, providing certificates which can help for their resumes and for their future job search. And they are providing information and orientation sessions, so it can be one-on-one and it can be in group.
And yeah, to add on briefly, as Ms. has mentioned in her speech, well, the main difference between the policy that can be made upon youth and youth need is that they shouldn't like mix the two terms together, because their reasons to become unemployed is not the same. While when we look at the people in employment in education, for example, there can be a lot of reasons why a person who is, I don't know, right now pursuing his or her studies are not employed. There can be various of reasons for that. For example, not having network, not, I don't know, preparing his or her resume, not having connections, etc. However, when we talk about the need in particular, the background goes a little bit deeper. Needs are needs mostly because of their backgrounds. Because, for example, they're immigrants, or maybe because they have parents that in worse conditions, or maybe because of their poor health conditions or mental conditions. It's like that. So one should be aware of the difference between the person that are in education but not in employment and youth needs.
Yeah, vulnerable population.
Is one of them, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think that there's a lot of, you know, seeking to get clarity and understanding regarding, you know, we talked about newcomer employment programs versus youth newcomer employment programs. And so the other question that then came is, between mainstream youth employment programs and newcomer youth employment programs, is there differences, and how do these programs look to better support newcomer youth who may be NEET?
Okay, so basically what I want to say that there's no specific like youth newcomer youth employment services or program. That is why I was saying in my presentation that will be great if we could create a program or a service, not a program, but just service specifically for newcomer youth. That can include mentorship in employment, but for example, cross-cultural services. The person can, the one that can help them introduce the Canadian job system, and for example, to be able to connect them with employers, to connect them with other youth who are already employed, and can help, or for example, guide the youth how to find a job. So this what is we are lacking, for example, and this what was my ideas to create a service specifically for newcomer youth.
Because there is an emerging issue. For example, let's take a profile real quick. Let's say there's a, I don't know, student from University of Toronto named Matt. He's studying computer science and he's in his sophomore year. He is not currently employed, but he's going to education, going through his education. He's not currently employed because he didn't apply for any, let's say, or maybe he didn't find it necessary, or maybe he hasn't like enough funds, or he's okay with, I don't know, his current level of experience, or his current level of like income. On the other hand, let's talk about, I don't know, Omar, who is coming from Egypt just the other week or just 2 years ago, 3 years ago, regardless, uh, who doesn't have his parents here, whose parents are facing a lot of struggles in his home country, in their home country, and he's living here alone, and he has mental problems, which later on concluded in physical problems too. He's isolated. He doesn't have any idea about the I don't know, system of Canada, even law system, even basic knowledge. He doesn't know how to apply for a job. He doesn't know if he should include his photo in the resume or not. Yeah, or if I don't know, he should study. He can study. His diploma will be like accredited here, or which kind of problems he can apply to. Does he have enough English to talk about, or apply for those programs, or to be admitted to, or to continue his education after he's been admitted to, etc., etc. So clearly, these two profiles are like significantly different from each other. But that's why when organizations want to tackle problems about youth needs, they need to be aware of the difference
Exactly.
and their background and the reasons that they have become youth.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Muska and Kemal. It's been great to hear and talk about this subject, and I think that there's a lot of direction and exploration that still needs to be and still can be done in further conversation. So we will be sharing out the PowerPoint presentations with your contact information.
Yeah.
And so I would suggest that individuals, if they still have further questions, to connect with either of you. And just before I say our closing remarks, I just wanted to note that ISS of BC also has a specific youth employment program that they wanted to mention. So great to hear that there are programs that are emerging to support newcomer youth. And so thank you so much. And so I just wanted to, in closing, thank everyone today for joining us, for taking part in answering your polls, and for submitting all of your questions. As I mentioned, we will be sending an email out that includes the PowerPoint slides, as well as a link to an online evaluation form. And so please take the time to fill out that evaluation, as AMSA really relies on the feedback that we hear from service providers and staff working in those agencies in terms of the future plans and training, planning what your needs are. A special thank you again to our speakers, Kemal and Muska. Thank you for your time, sharing your expertise, and really your passion and knowledge with the rest of the settlement and integration sector. As well, big thank you to the AMSA team, Khan, Julie, and Melissa for supporting today's webinar. As mentioned earlier, we will be sending out a notification on SettlementNet once the webinar the recording of the webinar has been posted online. And if you're not yet receiving those SettlementNet updates, please go to the website amsa.org/settlementnet to sign up. Again, I would just like to thank Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada for funding today's event. Thank you for tuning in, everyone, and hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.